She raised him for 5 years, bathed him, read to him, held him through fevers and nightmares. Then the paycheck stopped, not because she quit, but because the boy's father finally noticed she was the only mother his son had ever known. And when she tried to walk away at the airport, a 5-year-old boy grabbed her hand and screamed one word in front of 300 strangers. A word that would force a billionaire to choose between his pride and his son's heart. This is the story of the nanny who became a mother in every way except on paper, and the moment that changed everything. Attachment theory says children form bonds with whoever shows up, feeds them, holds them, stays. For 5 years, that person was a black woman from the Bronx named Amara, working in a Seoul penthouse for a man who paid her rent but never learned her birthday. The boy she raised, Kim Yi-won, called her Mama long before he could say his own name. And the law had no word for what she was. No contract, no recognition, just a paycheck that could stop any Friday, but the boy knew. And when that paycheck finally stopped, he made sure the whole world knew too. This isn't just a story about a nanny. It's about who the law calls family and who the heart won't let go. Amara Jube came to Seoul in 2018 with a nursing degree from a community college in the Bronx and a single photograph of her grandmother tucked inside her passport. She had never held a child who wasn't related to her. She had never seen a penthouse with a private elevator. She had never met a billionaire. But she had $47,000 in student debt and a rental eviction notice that arrived on her 28th birthday. So when the agency called about a live-in position for a family called Kim, no details beyond private residence, inch area, competitive salary, she said yes before the recruiter finished the sentence. That first interview was not with the father. It was with a woman named Mrs. H. Wang, the household manager, who wore a gray suit and asked Amara questions in Korean that Amara answered through an interpreter. The interpreter, a young man named Seo-jun, later told her Mrs. H. Wang had asked, "Can you eat rice 3 times a day? Do you know how to fold a man's suit without creasing the shoulders? Are you afraid of crying?" Amara answered yes, yes, and no. She got the job. The salary was $4,200 a month, more than she had ever earned in her life, plus room, board, and health insurance. What she did not know, what no one told her, was that the family had already been through 4 nannies in 18 months. The last one had left after 3 days. The child, Yi-won, was then 14 months old. He did not speak. He did not point. He did not respond to his name. The pediatric neurologist had written suspected attachment disorder in his chart, but the father, Kim Tae-ho, CEO of Hansung Bio, had the report filed away and never mentioned it again. On Amara's first morning, Mrs. H. Wang led her into a nursery that looked like a catalog spread. White furniture, white curtains, a white rug. The only color in the room was the boy himself, sitting in the corner with his back to the door holding a single red block. Amara sat down on the floor 6 feet away. She did not speak. She did not reach for him. She took out her phone, opened a photo of her grandmother, and placed it on the rug between them. Then she waited. 47 minutes. That was how long it took Yi-won to turn around, crawl to the photograph, pick it up, and hand it to her. His first voluntary interaction with another human being in 3 months. Amara smiled. She said, "That's my grandma. Her name is Lillian. She's the reason I'm here." Yi-won looked at her face. Then he sat down in her lap. And that was how it began. For the next 12 months, Amara was the only person Yi-won allowed to touch him. She learned his patterns, the way he needed exactly 45 seconds of humming before sleep, the way he would only eat rice if it was shaped into a ball, the way he flinched at sudden noises but relaxed if she made a soft clicking sound with her tongue. She documented everything in a notebook she bought at a Daiso for $2, feeding times, nap durations, words he attempted. She learned that he was not nonverbal, he was selective. He spoke for her. After 6 months, he could say more water, no light, and Amara, always her full name, never a shortened version. The father visited the nursery exactly 8 times that first year. Each visit lasted less than 10 minutes. Kim Tae-ho was a man whose face had been trained to show nothing. He was 41, recently widowed. His wife had died in a car accident when Yi-won was 6 months old, and he had responded to grief the way he responded to every other disruption, by working harder. Hansung Bio had just completed a merger worth $1.2 billion. He was in negotiations with 3 European pharmaceutical firms. He was being considered for a government advisory board on biotechnology policy. He did not have time for a child who would not look at him, but he did have time, Amara noticed, to stand in the doorway of the nursery and watch. he would never enter. He would stand with his hands in his pockets, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the boy sitting in Amara's lap. Once at the 7-month mark, Yi-won looked up and saw his father in the doorway. He looked back at Amara. He said, "Amara, who is that?" Amara said, "That's your father, Yi-won." The boy considered this. "No," he said, "that's the man who walks by," and went back to his puzzle. Kim Tae-ho heard it. He turned and walked away. He did not come back for 3 weeks. The turning point came in the 2nd year. Amara had been promoted unofficially from nanny to full-time caregiver. She was now responsible for Yi-won's meals, his therapy appointments, his sleep schedule, and his emotional regulation. She was also, by this point, teaching him English and basic Korean. She had created a routine that worked. Morning walk in the garden, structured play, lunch, nap, sensory activities, dinner, bath, stories. The boy was thriving. He was speaking in full sentences. He was making eye contact with Mrs. Hwang and the kitchen staff. He was even, on good days, waving at the gardener, but the father remained a ghost. Until the night Yi-won ran a fever of 104 degrees. It was 2:47 a.m. Amara woke to the sound of the baby monitor crackling with irregular breathing. She was in his room in seconds. His face was flushed, his lips dry, his small body trembling. She took his temperature. 104.2. She called the house doctor, no answer. She called the driver, no answer. She called Kim Tae-ho, the private number Mrs. Hwang had given her for emergencies only. He answered on the first ring. "What is it?" she told him. He said, "I'm coming down." He arrived in the nursery 3 minutes later, still in his dress shirt from the dinner he had hosted that evening, his hair disheveled, his face, for the first time Amara had ever seen, unguarded. He looked at Yi-won. He looked at Amara. He said, "I don't know what to do." Amara said, "I need you to hold him while I get the cold compress. Can you do that?" He hesitated. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and lifted his son, his own son, whom he had not held since the funeral, into his arms. Yi-won was too sick to resist. He curled into his father's chest, made a small sound and fell asleep. Kim Tae-ho sat there for 2 hours holding his son while Amara applied compresses and monitored the fever. At 5:17 a.m. the fever broke. Yi-won opened his eyes, looked at his father's face and said, "Daddy." It was the first time he had ever said the word. Kim Tae-ho cried. Amara pretended not to notice. She left the room, closed the door, and stood in the hallway with her back against the wall, breathing. She knew in that moment that something had changed. What she did not know, what no one could have predicted, was that the change would not bring them together. It would tear everything apart. Because 3 weeks later, Mrs. Hwang called Amara into the office and said, "The family is very grateful for your service, but Mr. Kim has decided to remarry. The wedding is in 6 months. The new Mrs. Kim will be arriving next month, and she prefers, how do I say this, a fresh start for the household." Amara understood. She packed her bags the next morning. She did not say goodbye to Yi-won, she was told not to, but the boy found her anyway. He was waiting by the service elevator, red block in hand, tears streaming down his face, holding out the photograph he had taken from her nightstand, the one of her grandmother Lillian. He said, "You forgot this. You can't go without this." And Amara knelt down and held him for the last time, or what she thought was the last time. She did not know that in 4 days, that same boy would stand in the middle of Incheon International Airport and scream a single word that would make headlines across the country. She did not know that the father who had just let her go would chase her through security, his shoes untied, his composure shattered. And she definitely did not know that the woman waiting at baggage claim, the new Mrs. Kim, would watch the whole thing on a smartphone live stream and make a decision that would change every life in that terminal. But all of that was about to happen, and it would begin with a photograph, a red block, and a 5-year-old boy who had decided that the woman who saved him was not going anywhere. Incheon International Airport, Terminal 1, Departure Gate 27, Tuesday morning, 6:45 a.m. Amara Dube had one checked bag, a carry-on, and the photograph of her grandmother tucked inside her passport. She had not slept in 36 hours. She had not eaten in 12. She had said goodbye to no one except Mrs. Hwang, who had handed her an envelope with 3 months' severance and a note that read, "He will not forget you." Amara had folded the note into her pocket without reading it twice because she knew if she read it again she would not leave. She was 12 feet from the security checkpoint when she heard the sound, not a voice, a wail, the kind of sound a child makes when the ground has disappeared beneath them. She turned. Yi-won was running toward her through the terminal, barefoot, still in his pajamas, a blue set with rocket ships on the collar. His socks were in one hand, his red block was in the other. Behind him, 30 yards back, Kim Tae-ho was sprinting in dress shoes, his tie undone, his phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of controlled panic. He was shouting something in Korean that Amara could not make out, but Yi-won was faster. He reached her before his father could. He wrapped both arms around her legs, pressed his face into her thigh, and screamed a word in Korean that made every passenger within 50 feet turn. Ioma, mama. A woman who had just been boarding a flight to Jeju stopped and raised her phone. A businessman pulling a roller bag took out his AirPods. A security guard began walking toward them. Amara knelt down. She put her hands on Yi-won's shoulders. She said, "Yi-won, I have to go." He said, "Then I am going with you. I have my socks, I have my block, I can carry my own bag." He was 5 years old. He had never been on a plane. He did not know where the Bronx was. He did not care. Kim Tae-ho arrived, his chest heaving. He grabbed Yi-won's arm, not hard but firm, and said, "Yi-won, let go now." Yi-won looked up at his father with an expression that was not anger and not defiance. It was something worse, disappointment. He said, "You let her go, so I am going with her." And he held on tighter. The security guard reached them. The guard asked in English, "Is there a problem?" Kim Tae-ho straightened. He smoothed his tie. He said, "No problem. My son is upset. We'll handle it." But the guard had already noticed the boy's bare feet, the pajamas, the way the woman was crying and the man was not. He said, "Sir, I need you to step back." And that was the moment Kim Tae-ho made the decision that would change everything. He looked at Amara. He said, "Don't get on that plane." She said, "I was told to leave." He said, "I was wrong." And he said it loud enough that the businessman with the roller bag heard it and started recording. Yi-won looked up at his father. He said, "Say it again." Kim Tae-ho looked at his son. Then he looked at the security guard, at the growing crowd, at the woman who had raised his child for 5 years. He said, "I was wrong. She should stay. Please just don't go." Amara had waited 4 years for those words. She had imagined them 100 times in 100 different rooms while Yi-won slept in her arms. But they arrived in a departure terminal, surrounded by strangers, with a security guard waiting for her answer. She said, "I don't have a job, I don't have a visa, I don't have a home." Kim Tae-ho said, "I'll fix it." And then a woman's voice cut through the terminal from behind the crowd. "No, you won't." It was Sua, the new Mrs. Kim. She had arrived without anyone noticing. She was wearing heels and a cream coat that probably cost more than Amara's year of severance. She had an iPhone in her hand, and the screen was dark, but the camera had been recording. She had been watching the entire scene from somewhere near the coffee stand. She walked forward. The crowd parted. She stood between Kim Tae-ho and Amara. She handed her phone to the businessman still recording and said, "Keep filming. I want every second of this." Then she turned to Amara. "You're fired, again. And this time I will make sure you never work in this country again." Yi-won looked at Sua. He had met her exactly twice. Once at the engagement dinner where she had pinched his cheek and said, "You'll grow on me," and once in the hallway of the penthouse where she had stared at a drawing he had made of him and Amara and said nothing. He did not know her. He did not trust her. He held his red block up like a shield and said, "You are not my mother." Sua smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I know, sweetheart, but I am your father's wife. And that means I decide who stays and who goes." She turned to Kim Tae-ho. "Make the call or I will." And she walked away, her heels clicking on the terminal floor, each step a countdown. Kim Tae-ho did not make the call, not then. He stood in the middle of departures, his son clinging to his nanny, his wife walking away, his reputation unraveling. He said, "Amara, 1 week, give me 1 week." She looked at Yi-won. Yi-won looked at her. She said, "1 week. Then I'm gone." She did not get on the plane. She walked back through the terminal, Yi-won holding her hand, his bare feet padding against the polished floor. Kim Tae-ho followed at a distance. The businessman who had been recording sold the footage to a local news outlet for $300. By noon, it had been viewed 200,000 times. By 6 p.m., it was the top story on every major Korean news platform. The headline read, "Billionaire's son begs nanny to stay inside the fallout." The comments section was a war zone. Some called Amara a gold digger, some called Kim a neglectful father, some called Sua a villain, and some, the ones who had read between the lines, asked the question no one wanted to answer. Where was the mother? Not the new one, the real one, the woman who had died 5 years ago. The woman whose portrait still hung in the penthouse study, directly above the desk where Kim Tae-ho signed his contracts. That story had never been told, but it was about to surface, because the woman who had been watching the live stream from her apartment in Gangnam, The woman who had not been mentioned in a single news report was the maternal grandmother of Yi-wan. She had watched her daughter die in that car accident. She had watched her son-in-law hire a stranger to raise her grandchild. She had watched Amara do what no one else could, and she had the original custody documents, the medical records, and the voicemail her daughter had left hours before the crash, a voicemail in which she begged her husband, "If anything happens to me, promise me Amara will raise our son, not your mother, not a stranger." Amara. Kim Tae-ho had never shown that voicemail to anyone. He had deleted it from his phone hours after the funeral, but the grandmother had kept a copy. And now, on the night of the airport incident, she sent it to a reporter at the Seoul Broadcasting System with a single line, "This is what he buried." Amara did not know any of this. She was in a hotel room in Incheon, paid for by Mrs. H. Wang's personal card. Yi-won was asleep in the twin bed next to hers, still in his rocket ship pajamas, his red block clutched to his chest. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through comment threads in a language she half understood, when a notification appeared, a text from an unknown number. It read, "They will come for you in the morning. Do not open the door, I am on your side. Mrs. Park." Amara did not know anyone named Mrs. Park, but the grandmother of Yi-won, whose name was Park Min-young, had just launched a legal motion to terminate Kim Tae-ho's parental rights. And she had named Amara Dube as the sole guardian in her petition. The court date was set for Monday morning. This is what he buried. The morning came faster than Amara expected. She had not slept. She had watched the hotel room door, the text from an unknown number still glowing on her phone. "They will come for you in the morning. Do not open the door, I am on your side. Mrs. Park." She did not know who Mrs. Park was, but the name Park was the name of Yi-won's mother, Soo-yeon, Park Soo-yeon, the woman who had died, the woman whose portrait hung in the penthouse study. The woman whose mother had been locked out of her grandson's life for 5 years. That grandmother, Park Min-young, had not been invited to the funeral. She had not been invited to Yi-won's first birthday. She had been sent a single photograph of the boy at 18 months, and then the calls stopped. She had sued for visitation rights twice. Both times, Kim Tae-ho's legal team had buried her in procedural delays. She was not rich. She was not connected. She was a retired piano teacher living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Gangnam, surviving on a monthly pension of $1,200. But she had one thing Kim Tae-ho did not, the voicemail. And that morning, while Amara sat in the Incheon hotel with Yi-won still asleep in the next bed, Mrs. Park Min-young held a press conference in front of the Seoul family court. She stood behind a podium she had rented with her own money. She held up a printed transcript of the voicemail her daughter had left 5 years ago. She read it aloud. "Tae-ho, if you're listening to this later, I need you to know something. If I don't wake up, if something happens, I need you to keep Amara. She's the only person I trust with our son, not your mother, not your sister, not the woman your mother already picked for you. Amara, she knows him, she loves him. She will raise him the way we wanted. Promise me, Tae-ho." The transcript was timestamped 11:47 p.m., 14 hours before the accident. Mrs. Park lowered the paper. She said, "My daughter knew she was going to die. She did not know how or when, but she knew, and she made her husband promise. That promise was broken the moment Amara Dube was handed a severance envelope." The cameras flashed. The reporters ran to their vans. Within 90 minutes, the story had a new headline: "Deceased mother's voicemail reveals husband betrayed final wish." Amara saw it in the hotel room. Yi-won woke up, crawled into her lap and pointed at the phone. "Who is that lady?" Mrs. Park on the screen. Amara said, "That's your grandmother, your mother's mother." Yi-won looked at the screen. He looked at Amara. He said, "She looks sad." Amara said, "She is sad. She wants to meet you." Yi-won thought about this. Then he said, "Is she nice?" Amara said, "I don't know yet, but she sent me a text that said she's on our side." Yi-won nodded. "Then she's nice." And he put his head on Amara's shoulder, his red block pressed between them. The door to the hotel room shook. A knock, then another, then a voice. "Ms. Dube, we're from Seoul Family Services. We need to speak with you regarding the minor child, Yi-won Kim. Please open the door." 2 hours later, a separate car arrived. Kim Tae-ho's lawyers had filed an emergency motion for sole custody, claiming Amara Dube had abducted the child. The grandmother's petition was stalled pending a hearing, and the court had issued a temporary order placing Yi-won in the custody of his father pending investigation. Amara had to hand him over. She had no legal standing. She was a nanny without a contract. She was not listed on any birth certificate. She had no rights. She knelt down in the hotel room. Yi-won was crying. The social worker was waiting in the hallway. Amara said, "Yiwon, I need you to be brave for a little while. Can you do that?" He said, "No, I'm already brave. I'm tired of being brave." She said, "I know I'm tired too, but I will come back for you, I promise." He said, "You promised you were not going to leave, and then you left. And then I had to run through the airport." She had no answer to that. He was right. She held him for 2 more minutes. Then she opened the door. The social worker took his hand. Yiwon did not scream. He did not fight. He walked to the elevator, holding his red block, looking back once. He said, "I will not forget you." And the doors closed. Amara stood in the empty hallway for 17 minutes. Then she called Mrs. Hwang. Then she called the number from the text. Mrs. Park answered on the first ring. "They took him," Amara said. "I know," Mrs. Park said. "I was there. I was in the lobby. I saw them bring him out." "Why didn't you stop them?" "Because I cannot stop a court order, but I can fight the next one, and I will. But I need you to tell me something first, and I need you to be honest." "Okay, did you love her, my daughter?" Amara had not expected the question. She did not know how to answer. Suyeon had been her first friend in Korea. They had met at a language exchange in Hongdae 6 months before Yiwon was born. Suyeon was funny, direct, unafraid of silence. She had taught Amara how to say "I'm not angry" in Korean and then how to mean it. She had been the one who convinced Kim Tae-ho to hire Amara full-time. She had been the one who said, "If anything happens to me, take care of my son." They were not lovers. They were not family. They were something else. Something the law had no name for. Amara said, "Yes, I loved her, not the way you're thinking, but yes, I loved her." Mrs. Park was silent for a long time. Then she said, "Good, then we have a case." That week, the war moved to court. Kim Tae-ho's legal team filed a counter-petition. They argued that Amara Dube had been hired as domestic staff, not a guardian, that she had no legal or biological relationship to the child, that her presence in Yiwon's life had been temporary by design. They also filed a motion for a gag order to prevent Mrs. Park from releasing the voicemail to the public. The court denied the gag order. Mrs. Park released the full recording. It aired on national television. Kim Tae-ho's mother, the elder Mrs. Kim, gave an interview to a conservative newspaper in which she called Amara an opportunist who exploited my son's grief. She also said, "That woman is not one of us. She never was." The phrase "not one of us" became a hashtag within hours. It was used both to attack Amara and to defend her. The internet split. But Suar, the new Mrs. Kim, was not silent. She gave her first interview to a lifestyle magazine, sitting in the penthouse, wearing white, her hands folded. She said, "I married a man who needed help. I did not sign up to raise another woman's child with a stranger. If his grandmother wants custody so badly, let her prove she can provide for him. But let's be honest, a retired piano teacher on a pension, a nanny from the Bronx with no visa. These are not the people who should raise a Kim." The interviewer asked, "What do you want to happen?" Suar smiled. "I want what is best for Yiwon. And what is best for Yiwon is a stable home with 2 parents who love him. That is us. His father and me. Everyone else is a distraction." But Yiwon, in the temporary custody of his father, was not eating. He was not speaking. He was sitting in his room, in the corner, his red block in his hand, refusing to leave. He had stopped calling Amara's name. He had stopped calling his father's name. He had stopped calling anyone's name. The pediatric psychiatrist retained by the court filed an urgent report. The child is exhibiting symptoms consistent with acute attachment disruption. He has lost his primary caregiver. If this situation continues without intervention, the psychological damage may be irreversible. The report was filed on Thursday. The final custody hearing was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. By Friday, Amara had a lawyer pro bono, a young family attorney named Han Soo-jin who worked for a legal aid clinic. She had taken the case because she had seen the airport video and cried. She said, "We have 3 things working for us: the voicemail, the psychiatrist's report, and the fact that the child refuses to eat. The court cannot ignore a starving child." She paused. "But we also have one thing working against us. You are not a citizen, you have no family here, and the father's legal team is going to argue that you are a flight risk. They will say that if you lose, you will disappear to the United States, and Yiwon will never see you again." Amara said, "They are not wrong. I can't stay without a work visa, and I can't get a work visa without a sponsor, and my only sponsor fired me." Han Soo-jin said, "Then we need to make you impossible to deport." She was not joking. On Saturday morning, Han Soo-jin filed a motion for Amara to be recognized as a person of interest in the custody proceedings. She also filed a separate motion, one that made headlines, for Amara to be granted temporary guardianship under the principle of in loco parentis, a legal doctrine that allowed non-biological caregivers to be recognized as parental figures if they had provided long-term, consistent care. The court was forced to respond by Monday. That night, Amara received a call from a blocked number. It was Kim Tae-ho. He said, "I am going to lose my son." She said, "You already lost him." He said, I know, and I don't know how to fix it." There was a long pause, then he said, "Suar is pregnant." Amara felt the floor tilt. "What? She's pregnant? She told me this morning. She said if I don't win this custody battle, she's leaving. She said she won't raise her child in a house where the first son belongs to another woman's memory." Amara said, "That's not your son, Tae-ho. That is a baby. Yi-won is a child. He is 5 years old. He is already here. He is already yours." Kim Tae-ho was silent. Then he whispered, "I don't know how to be his father. I never learned. I tried. I failed. You did it for me. And now I am losing both of them." Amara closed her eyes. She said, "You are not losing both of them. You are choosing one. That is the only choice you have to make. Choose Yi-won, choose him, and I will help you. But if you choose her, I am gone, and I will take him with me if I can." The line was silent for 30 seconds. Then Kim Tae-ho said, "I don't know if I can," and he hung up. Amara sat in the dark of her borrowed room, the phone still in her hand. She had 2 days until the hearing. She had no plan. She had no backup. She had a child who was starving himself in a penthouse, a grandmother who had just pawned her wedding ring to pay for a lawyer, and a father who did not know if he was brave enough to choose his own son. Then her phone buzzed again, a new message from Mrs. Park. "I found something in Soo-yeon's old journals. She wrote about you. She wrote that if anything happened to her, you were the only person she trusted to raise her son. But she also wrote something else. She wrote that she knew her husband's family would try to erase you, so she left something for you, a letter, in a safety deposit box. The key is in Yi-won's red block." Amara stood up. Her hands were shaking. The red block, the one Yi-won had been carrying since she met him, the one he had brought to the airport, the one he had slept with every night. She had thought it was a toy. It was not. It was a key. And inside that safety deposit box was a letter from a dead woman that could end the entire case or destroy every life connected to it. Monday morning, the hearing. Amara walked into the courtroom with the letter sealed in an envelope, not yet opened. She had not read it. She had been too afraid. Mrs. Park sat in the front row. Yi-won was brought in by a court officer, his hands small in the adult grip. He looked thinner. His eyes were hollow. He saw Amara. He did not run to her. He placed his red block on the table in front of her and said, "Open it. There's something inside." She had not told him the block contained the key. He had known anyway. He always knew. She broke open the plastic. Inside was a small brass key and a note from her mother. "For Amara, find the box, read the letter, then decide if you still want to save him." The courtroom was silent. The judge waited. Kim Tae-ho leaned forward. Suar, seated beside him, checked her phone. Amara held the key in her palm. She had not yet decided whether to use it, but she would have to decide soon because the judge was about to call the first witness, and the letter was not evidence until it was read. And once read, it could not be unread. This was the moment everything would break open. She looked at Yi-won. He looked back. He said, "I already know what it says. She told me in my dreams. She said you would stay." Amara opened the envelope. The envelope was unsealed, but the paper inside felt old, yellowed at the edges, folded 3 times. Amara pulled it out. The courtroom waited. She unfolded it. The handwriting was Soo-yeon's, familiar, careless, the way letters leaned forward when she wrote in a hurry, dated 3 days before the accident. Amara read it to herself first. Then she looked up at the judge, at the grandmother, at the father who had deleted the voicemail. She began to read aloud. "To whoever reads this, if you are holding this letter, then Amara found the key, which means Yi-won gave her the block, which means I am dead. So let me be clear. I am not dead because of an accident. I am dead because my mother-in-law, the elder Mrs. Kim, knew I was planning to leave her son. I had filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier. I had documentation of his affairs, of his mother's interference, of their plan to marry him off to a suitable woman the moment I was gone. I was not killed by a drunk driver. The crash was staged. The driver was paid. The evidence was buried. And the person who paid for it is sitting in this courtroom or watching from a distance." The courtroom erupted. The judge pounded the gavel. The elder Mrs. Kim, who had been seated in the back row, stood up and walked out. Suar, the new Mrs. Kim, went pale. Kim Tae-ho stared at the letter like it was a ghost. The judge called a recess. Amara did not stop reading. There was more. "Amara, I know you did not ask for this, but I am giving you my son because you are the only person I trust. Tae-ho will not fight for him. His mother will destroy him. The new wife will use him. But you will love him without condition. That is why I wrote this. That is why I left the key. That is why I am trusting you with everything I have left. Raise him in your own country if you must. Teach him to speak your language. Teach him to be kind. And tell him every day that his mother chose him over money, over safety, over her own life." The letter ended. Amara lowered the paper. The courtroom was silent. Yiwan was standing now, holding the edge of the table, his eyes fixed on her. He said, "Did my mother write that?" Amara nodded. He said, "Then she is still here," and he pointed at the letter. "She is in that paper, she is in the block, she is everywhere." The judge returned. He called the court to order. He announced that the elder Mrs. Kim had been taken into custody pending investigation into the vehicular homicide allegations. He then read the letter into the record as Exhibit A, and then he addressed the custody petition. This court has heard evidence of a voicemail, a letter, medical records, and a child's psychological evaluation. The child has not eaten properly in 8 days. He has not spoken to his father. He has identified his primary caregiver as Amara Dube. The court recognizes the principle of in loco parentis. It is the ruling of this court that temporary full custody of Yiwan Kim be granted to Amara Dube and Park Min-young, maternal grandmother, as joint guardians, pending a full investigation into the father's fitness and the circumstances of the mother's death. Biological father Kim Tae-ho is granted supervised visitation twice weekly to be increased upon the completion of a court-ordered parenting program. This court will reconvene in 90 days for a final determination. Kim Tae-ho stood. He did not argue. He walked to where Amara stood, still holding the letter. He said, "Read it to me, all of it, I need to hear it." She read it to him, standing in the aisle of the courtroom while Yiwan held her hand. When she finished, Kim Tae-ho knelt down to his son. He said, I did not know what my mother did. I did not know about the letter. I did not know about the divorce. I did not know anything. I was not paying attention. I failed you. I failed her. I failed everyone." Yiwan looked at him. Then he said, "You can learn. I learned to tie my shoes. You can learn to be my father." Kim Tae-ho cried. That afternoon, Amara walked out of the Seoul family court with Yiwan's hand in hers, the letter folded into her pocket, and a new legal status she had never expected to hold. She was not a citizen. She was not a relative, but she was, according to the Republic of Korea, the legal guardian of a 5-year-old Korean boy. The grandmother walked beside her. Mrs. Park took her free hand. They walked in silence to a small restaurant 2 blocks away where Mrs. H. Wang had reserved a table. The kitchen staff from the penthouse was already there. Mrs. O had cooked. They did not talk about the case. They ate. Yiwan ate 3 bowls of rice. That night, alone in the hotel room that would become their home for the next month, Amara finally opened the safety deposit box. It contained Soo-yeon's journals, a savings bond worth $40,000 in Amara's name, and a photograph of Amara and Soo-yeon from the language exchange, both of them laughing, heads tilted together. On the back, in Soo-yeon's handwriting, "The day I knew I could leave my son with you." Amara put the photograph in her passport, next to the one of her grandmother. She looked at Yiwan, asleep in the twin bed, the red block on the pillow beside him. He looked peaceful for the first time in months. She thought about the hook that started this story, a boy in an airport screaming for the woman who raised him. That boy got what he wanted, but not in the way anyone expected. He got a mother who was not his mother. He got a grandmother who had fought for him. He got a father who was starting over. And he got a dead mother who had left instructions, clear, unignorable instructions, from beyond the grave. The surprising detail that emerged weeks later, buried in the elder Mrs. Kim's financial records, was that she had transferred $300,000 to a shell company owned by the driver of the other car on the same day as the accident. She had been planning it for 6 months. The motive? Soo-yeon had discovered that the elder Mrs. Kim had been embezzling from the family's charitable foundation for years. Soo-yeon was going to expose her. Soo-yeon was killed for it. The elder Mrs. Kim was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder. She is serving a life sentence. Kim Tae-ho sold his majority stake in Hansung Bio and started a small foundation focused on children's mental health, named after Soo-yeon. He attends parenting classes 3 times a week. He learned to cook. Yiwan now calls him Appa without hesitation. Amara received a special immigrant visa based on her guardianship status, later converted to permanent residency. She enrolled in a master's program in child development at Seoul National University. She lives in a 2-bedroom apartment near Mrs. Park's building. Yiwan walks to school with his grandmother every morning. And every night before bed, he places the red block on his nightstand and says, "Good night, Mom. Good night, Amara." He has 2 mothers now, one in the earth, one in the next room. The law did not plan for either of them, but the law learned to keep up. This is what happens when a child decides who his family is and the world finally listens. This story could have ended differently. It almost did. Amara could have boarded that plane. Yiwon could have been silenced. The letter could have stayed hidden in a red block, unread, buried with its owner. But the difference between a tragedy and a second chance is often the size of a single voice. In this case, the voice of a 5-year-old boy who refused to let the world forget who had loved him first. What Amara did for Yiwon is not unique. It happens every day, in every city, in every household where a caregiver shows up and a parent does not. The law rarely catches up to the bond. The paperwork rarely reflects the truth, but the child always knows. The child always knows who held them through the fever, who taught them to tie their shoes, who stayed when everyone else walked away. The lingering question is not about Amara and Yiwon. They are safe, they are together, they are rebuilding. The question is for the rest of us. How many children are living right now with a caregiver who is not their parent but is their anchor? How many nannies, grandmothers, neighbors, and friends are raising children without a single legal right? How many families are held together by love alone, without a document that the state recognizes? The system catches up slowly. In loco parentis is an old doctrine, but it is not widely applied. Domestic workers are still the most unprotected labor force in most countries, and children like Yiwon are still being handed back to parents who have not earned the right to raise them. But stories like this one change things. They change the conversation. They change what a jury, a judge, or a stranger scrolling through comments believes is possible. If this story moved you, share it. Not just the link, the question at its center. Who deserves to be called a mother? Is it the one who gave birth or the one who showed up? Is it the one on the birth certificate or the one on the floor at 3 a.m. holding a child through a nightmare? The answer may be different for every family, but the question deserves to be asked out loud. And to Amara, to Yiwon, to Mrs. Park, and to every caregiver who has ever loved a child that was not legally theirs, thank you. Thank you for showing the world that family is not a document. It is a decision, a daily, relentless, beautiful decision. And sometimes, all it takes to prove that is a boy in pajamas, barefoot in an airport, holding a red block, and refusing to let go. Subscribe for more stories that challenge what you thought you knew about love, law, and the families we choose. And if you have a story about someone who raised you who was not your parent, drop it in the comments, because those stories deserve to be heard too. We will see you in the next one.